Hi, everyone, and welcome today to our Vineyard and Cost of Production Management and Budgeting session. Whether you manage a smaller vineyard or a larger one, understanding your cost of production is one of the most important tools for making informed decisions. Today's discussion will explore how growers can better understand the cost structure and improve operational efficiency and develop practical budgeting decisions and strategies. I'm very pleased to introduce to you today our presenter, Andrew Moon, who brings extensive experience in vineyard management and viticulture. Andrew is currently part of the vineyard team at Bartier Brothers, vineyard and winery in British Columbia. Prior to this, he spent many years as the viticulturalist and vineyard manager at Tinhorn Creek Vineyards, where he played a key role in managing large estate vineyards and working closely with both winemaking teams and independent growers. Originally from Australia, he trained in viticulture. Andrew moved to Canada in 2009 and has since become one of the most respected viticulturists in the region. In recognition to his contributions to the industry, Andrew was named Viticulturalist of the Year by the BC Grape Growers Association, highlighting his leadership in vineyard management, innovation, and sustainable practices. So thank you very much, Andrew, for being with us today. I'm sure.
Thank you very much, Caroline.
Yeah, of course. I'm sure the growers will have lots of questions at the end. So I'll hand it over to you and you can begin.
Okay. I didn't know I was hosting, but that's okay.
There we go. I have lots of questions just in case, people run out of things to say.
The point of this today is a lot of growers and wineries don't really know what their costs are. And it comes from the bottom down. What you're here for today is to actually learn. I'm not an accountant. I'm actually a vineyard manager, and I've been on the ground for 20 years plus here, or 15 in Canada and 10 in Australia. So hot climate and cold climate. Work for multiple companies, large families, large corporations, and small families. So I'll see the difference between a lot of ways that you run a vineyard and the way you have to report to different structures, and then just how costs work in a vineyard of different scale. I understand, I realise that where you guys are, the economies of scale and then just the weather, okay? You've got too many variables to worry about over there, and I'm guessing that you're in the middle of the cold. It's a beautiful 1 or 2 degrees here this morning in the Okanagan Valley, so and we're looking at an early spring. So that's going to cause a few planning issues. So we're going to be 2 to 3 weeks ahead of usual. The reason I know that is because you take into account historical data like bud burst, etc. Tools. We're also going to just have a general discussion about what happens in a vineyard interaction with wineries and what happens in general interaction with just everyday running of a vineyard, especially in areas where you don't have much structural support, like you just can't walk down to a local. That's what happens. Okay, so we're going to talk about, first of all, we're going to just talk about understanding your vineyard costs. And so the scope of that is there's a number of metrics in vineyards, and the biggest one I use is cost per acre, but you're going to use, that's because I live very close to the US here, okay? Multiple number of metrics. You can do labour over hectares. Just get used to, we'll send out a sheet, or I think Pereni has got a list of the current metrics. What you've got to do is get used to one of them. If you don't understand the metric, don't use it. It's as simple as that. The biggest one that I use is cost per hectare or cost per acre.
Yeah, we use the acres. Yeah.
That's fair. Anyway, that's the best way. And you can sort that into block. You can sort it into your whole entity. And that's the easiest way to track. I'm going to show you, I've got a couple of spreadsheets. I think there's a section at the end for spreadsheet sharing, but I just want to, hopefully I can do this. I was doing it on different technology, but I will have a go. I'll do the entire screen. Can we see that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So this isn't rocket science. If you can use an Excel spreadsheet, And here's a bit of advice. There's a lot of vineyard management programs. They're usually not vineyard management programs, usually winery management programs. And what happens is they tack vineyard parts onto the end of it, and they're not very good. When I say that, they don't actually track what you want to track. They track what the winery wants to track. So you get used to using something like these Excel spreadsheets. I know they're not all in one spot, but if you can get used to using these, there's probably 4 or 5 of them that are really important to doing costs for a vineyard. So I've just called this vineyard Black Sage. It's roughly about 15 acres. Okay, so what you can do, I'm pretty sure I'll send this to Perennia and you can get a copy of it. That doesn't worry me. Basically, you kind of break what you're comfortable in. So you can see this is quite handy. So this breaks your season down. You can see this is kind of a financial one. It's April 1st to March. And then all you do is you start running through and this is where record keeping is really important, and probably history that you can start to fill. It's a flow for your vineyard. You understand when tasks, or other people can understand when tasks are going to occur in your vineyard. And then you've also got basically your costs, which you can budget. You can see here that I've broken basically a total at the end, monthly costs, so a cost sheet, and then your cost per acre is there. If we go over here, and then there's kind of a summary just down the side. Okay, and it'll actually give you your cost per acre. Now, these are your variable costs, and they're not fixed costs. There's some things obviously in this list that are missing, and sometimes you can change that for your entity. If you've got fixed costs, and you might, winery here actually operates as buys of small assets and tools and things like that, so we don't put those costs into this budget. Okay.
Okay, let's see if the internet keeps cutting out, so hopefully it's better now.
Okay.
All
right.
But yes, I will send the sheet out to people if they request it.
So that's kind of an end result. You work up a budget. Now there's all these things that you have to record and get history of to get to that point in time. So first of all, and first thing I actually do, I buy a lot of fruit, and I'll go out to growers for the winery, and then the first thing I'll ask them is, what's your cost per acre? And they usually don't know. So the reason I ask that is because if you're say a winery might ask you to, which would be absolute yield would have to be so low, probably 0.5 tonne to the acre or something to get it ripe, due to its degree day requirement. And even if it's $3,000 or $4,000 a tonne, you're going to make $1,000, $2,000 an acre income. And if it's going to cost you, why would you grow Syrah for the winery? Okay, so these are the kind of little pitfalls that happen to a grower. We never ask a grower to grow Syrah in the Okanagan Valley because they won't make any money and they're not sustainable. So these are the little things that you have to think about when you're planting varieties, what their costs are, what their cost is to actually run them, and how much money they're worth per tonne at the time, because that will change over time. And obviously you're there to make money as a business. Hopefully a farm would break even. That's what we're hoping. And then if you make a profit, fantastic. All right. So we've got major cost components, typical pitfalls. That's one of them. Labour. So one of the major ones we see that most of the growers don't actually calculate their own labour cost, which is that's a terrible thing to do. You should calculate your labour cost at least at the minimum wage that's running in the area, and I would suggest you're probably worth more than the minimum wage. So that's the first thing that you should do. That's a major pitfall that the guys use. Inputs like fertiliser sprays, those kind of things. you really have to get into IPM or understand your vineyard so that you don't get ripped off when you go down to the local grower supply area and they're selling you a cold climate fungicide program that's worth $20,000 an acre and you could be getting away with it for $3,000 an acre. So that's another big pitfall that I see when running a vineyard. Same with fertilizers. Make sure you're doing soil tests, and I'm sure there's plenty of people like Perennia and etc. that can go and do soil analysis for you after you get your soil test done, and that would help you save money and waste and or destroying the environment by putting out too little, too less fertilizer. So that's one of the other things we see. So that's basically understanding your property and what is required. And then, so machinery, equipment and infrastructure, the biggest one I see is from vineyard establishment. And it's because your next door neighbour put in 6x3 vine spacing that you go and do that. Now you've just got to go and buy all new equipment because nothing fits in a 6-foot row. So establishment is very important for running a vineyard and the costs involved into the future. Vineyard spacing is based on vigour, okay, and vine potential. It's got nothing to do with the cost per acre of land, and that's why people jam as many vines into a vineyard as they can because of the cost per acre. It's got nothing to do with actual viticulture. You'll find that if you are growing really tight row spacings, that a winemaker is going to walk in at the end of the season and you're going to tell him it's 7 or 8 tonnes an acre, and he's going to tell you to drop the fruit anyway. Okay, so you might as well have planted it at 4x8 and let your tractor drive in there. So they're some of the pitfalls that happen from just vineyard establishment. And then the way you set up trellises and things, they have to be complementary to equipment. Okay, so you just can't run a harvester into a vineyard that's not set up for a harvester. Okay, so that means that things like cordon wires might be attached with a foliage clip. That's not acceptable for a harvester. Okay, so you'd have to put in a 2-inch barb staple or something like that to the wires to hold it up there. And that's just a simple example of the vineyard being complementary to a harvester. Okay, so the pitfalls, that's from just building the vineyard wrong in the first part, and that will cost you money. You won't be able to mechanise the vineyard further down the track. Headland space is a massive one. In non-metric, it's 30 feet, 10 metres. That's what you need at the end of your vineyard to turn anything around properly. If you're inside of that, you start slowing time, or you increase time every time you go into the vineyard, will cost you an absolute fortune. So it's actually probably more money than the extra 3 vines that you stuck at the end of the row, which the birds ate. So anyway, I'm just saying it's from infrastructure that from the start, and that's where we see most of the problems with adding cost. So then, yeah, we can ask any questions at the end of this for sure. You can go on and on about these kind of savings in every part of the vineyard. Productivity, like metrics that link to the cost of production, we're talking about those. So tonnes per hectare and per block, like I said, that's the tonnes per acre. That's the major one that I use, mainly because you can benchmark fairly well. If you know, the biggest variable in benchmarking is labour cost. Okay, so most of the other costs are pretty much the same, but labour costs, and I was looking through some of the figures from the Ontario growers and things like that, and they're 2 or 3 years old, and they were based on, say, $18 or $20 an hour. So I'm automatically adding 30% on for growing conditions here in the Okanagan. So our minimum wage is around just under the $20 mark. Most growers here are paying $25 an hour, and then loaded, that's coming out around 32. So remember that. Don't do your budgeting just on what the advertised dollars per hour is. You're probably adding at least 15% to that number. And then that is what your cost is per acre based on the labour. It's not, that's the actual cost. It's not, you have to pay work cover premiums, you have to pay payroll tax, insurances, all those kind of things. So make sure that you actually use those numbers correctly. Don't just go and use a straight salary-based number, okay? Labour hours per hectare tonne. That's an important one, and it's a lot to do with budgeting and time management. Especially the labour hours. So, say example how I'd work out pruning. I would. I've actually got a sheet which I can share for that one. Pruning costs. Oops. Wait up. I'm going to do some sharing.
Yeah, I think you can just share it. I think it's just.
Okay.
I set it so that you can just go ahead.
That does that.
Might take
Are we good?
Second. No, can't see anything yet.
It's not showing.
Advanced sharing, host and panelist multiple. Yeah, it should be.
Try it again. Here we go.
There we go.
How's that? Sorry, guys.
No.
I was de-healing a vineyard yesterday, and now I'm sitting on the computer. So here we go. So this is just an example when we're talking about labour hours. So I know, so this converts obviously into a cost per acre or whatever, but I want to know how many people I need over a certain period of time, and I know what time I have. So if we start pruning in December and finish in, say, March 31st, that means I've got 4 months to prune. And it depends on the acreage and the size of your farm, all those kind of things. And then you know how many labour hours is available to you. So if you know how much time it takes to prune, it's very important, because, I can look at a block, say this block of, say for the Merlot example, 1.8 acres. There's the vines, that's a vine count. So you can actually, that's an important thing, make sure that you know how many vines are per acre you have. It might be the theoretical one, but say if you're 20% dead, you got 20% less to prune. Etc. So have a look at the vine number, your minutes per vine. Now, the way you work that is go and prune. Okay, you go and prune. And then I usually add about 10-15% of time to that, because, people walk around the end of the rows, people walk backwards and forwards, people do things. So I actually, for budgeting reasons, I add a little bit of time onto them. It gives you vines per hour. It gives you an hours per row. That's up to you. I think these were based on like 400-foot rows. And then it gives you total labour hours. The best thing to do after that is your actual. So you can check your time, see how you went. And then this is a 2 thing. It's actually recorded whether the block was completed. But anyway, so see how simple this is, and this is a huge part. Pruning is a huge part of your cost component of your vineyard. So a simple spreadsheet like this may be 50% of your costs for your vineyard. So very important. That's a great metric, is the labour hours. Okay, so if you can work those out, and like I said, there's no better way to do it than actually get someone, if you go and prune, get someone to go and do it. Now, this pruning, this is the actual pruning. This is after pre-pruning with a machine. And then, depending on the block age, obviously, if it's a 2-bud block, you wouldn't be doing that. But it's basically, say, cane pruning, vines, or spur pruning vines. There's a massive difference in those 2 cost components. But then it basically goes from the pruning of that up to tying. So tying's an actual added cost onto this, and tying is roughly 10 hours, roughly an acre. Okay, so we can add that on at the end, and that gives you a whole pruning budget. All right, that's just yeah. I'll just get rid of that. Is this going along all right? Is everyone happy?
Yeah, I think so far so good.
I've only got an hour and I could do this for 3 weeks. Okay, so I'm trying to whip through these things as quick as I can and give us the biggest bang for your buck. Okay, it's like I said, there's about 3 or 4 sheets, 5 sheets of Excel that you can put together and start tracking your vineyard. Hopefully there's something, if there's a sustainability program maybe in Nova Scotia, out east there, even Ontario, wherever, they've got, I know they have infrastructure. I'm pretty sure Perennia's got some kind of infrastructure. If you can follow that infrastructure and then keep the costing sheets or tracking sheets for those things, you'll go 90% of the way in what you want to achieve in keeping costs for your vineyard or understanding your costs of your vineyard. Okay, scale. You probably don't have a choice. You've got what you got. Okay, but the bigger you are, the cheaper your costs. That's simple, simple economics. The reason being, so if you decide, it's a perfect example of that would be a machine harvester. You're not going to go and buy a $1 million machine harvester for your 10-acre vineyard. You can, but your return on your investment is probably going to be longer than your kid's lifetime. So we do studies of how many acres you need to run a machine harvester, and it's up around the 500-acre mark now. Okay, so that's the return on investment over 25 years, and machine harvesters lucky to last 25 years. All right, so I'm just saying that's a perfect example of economies of scale. Hand harvesting. In a normal area, hand harvesting might cost anywhere from $800 to $1,000 an acre, and a machine might cost anywhere from $400 to $600 an acre. If you're in Canada, it's the flip. It costs $1,500 an acre to machine harvest, and might be $1,000 an acre for hand harvesting. So that's a supply demand issue with machine harvesters. But yeah, so that's just an example of economies of scale. I know a lot of areas or regions, they do some share farming, share situations where they'll share tractors and things. That's a great idea, especially if you're a small grower. Contract farming is a great idea too. If you can't put the money towards the equipment that you need to get clean fruit and be efficient and all those kind of things, another way to look at profit sharing or a lease agreement or a contract farming agreement. So that's an economies of scale deal. How big your farm is, you might like going out on your 2 acres and living the dream. So that's a thing. So we can have a look at key management areas. Okay, dormant season pruning, trellis repair, soil prep. There's a lot of information around. Like I said, I looked at, there's places look pretty close to home there. You've got the Ontario reports, those kind of things. They've got a basic understanding of rough dollars per acre. The bottom line is, if you run a vineyard for 5 years, the first year is land prep. It's probably going to cost you nearly the same amount of money as running a second, third, or third year, fourth year, fifth year vineyard. The second year is double. Okay, so whatever the cost is per acre, say $10,000 an acre, it's going to cost you $20,000 an acre to do the land prep in the second year. It's probably more now that vines have become more expensive. I think when I first came to Canada 15 years ago, vines were $2.50. They're now nearly approaching 10.
Yeah.
Because of the $8 cost from the US and then the permits, the tariff and things like that. So that changes. That's a massive difference in vineyard establishment cost, especially you're talking 2,000, like a 7x3 is like 2,000 vines an acre. And that's a massive cost for establishment. So be very careful about those kind of things when you're establishing a vineyard, and be careful. We're very wary here. People are taking cuttings across the board in the valley, and there's a lot of leaf roll here in this valley, and they have no idea at pruning time that they're taking loaded vines with leaf roll back to their own properties. So, and that's just a thing to try and save money. It's highly dangerous, and you put your vineyard in as probably going to be viable for 5 years or something like that. So key management areas, like I said, your dormant season, and there's a lot of cost in that season. The pruning is probably 50% easily of your cost for your vineyard. So a very good one to understand the metrics of is the pruning costs. All right. We can ask, I can give some information about that later. I've got 15 years of data from Canada on pruning data. So if you're interested in that, that's fine. Canopy management, like we've talked a little bit about nutrition, pest and disease control, those kind of things. Like I said, understand your vineyard. Don't go just what the grower supply down the road tells you to buy, because they're going to make you put bunch closure sprays on, expensive insecticides, formulated powdery mildew sprays, all kinds of things where you might be able to get away with some other things for the season. So there's a lot of new products. It's like being a doctor sometimes. There's products come out all the time. I wish the CFIA would give us some more products, but that's beside the point. But yeah, there's a lot of new products out there. I grow both organic and sustainable and normal farming, so I can see the difference between the lot. And if you're organic, it's going to cost you double to do what you're doing. So that's a very, I wouldn't call it ideological or decision making to become organic is a huge cost difference in a vineyard.
Yeah.
There are a lot of programs now, and I'm not against organics, don't get me wrong. Organics is a very old industry, and it hasn't really changed. So I think it's a bit of a paradox where you got technology change and you're trying to help the environment, but you're going to stay doing things that you did in the 1800s. There's a lot of new programs, biodiversity programs, sustainable programs that you farm organically, but you're not putting yourself at risk. Okay, and when I say that, everyone should, you're putting your family at risk. If you've got staff, you're putting them at risk. Economic damage to your vineyard or sustainability is, there's no good you not being there tomorrow and say a third party comes in and buys your property or a region out that doesn't care about the environment. That's not very sustainable in my eyes. So that's one of the reasons why we don't usually do organics in most of our vineyards. We're fully into the BC sustainability program.
Yeah.
And those kind of organisations will help you pick the most viable and practical and cost-efficient spray programs and things like that. So you're not by yourself, right?
Yeah, that's important to know.
There's a lot of people out there that will help you in the industry that are not out for a buck, all right? So, yeah, we're farmers in the bottom end, and we're all trying to look after each other. Reconciling grape quality and quantity. This is a bugbear of mine, and that doesn't usually happen. Usually we try to grow fruit the best we can in our vineyard, all right? So we're all trying to grow A grade, which is ridiculous because like 1% of the market is A grade. All right. So we're putting all these inputs and things into a vineyard to grow the best quality fruit that we can. Whereas we might be able to set aside a block if this the winery, your winery customer, or they might want C grade. When I say that, it might be a $25 bottle of wine, but you shouldn't have to put the inputs into it that a $100 bottle of wine requires. So this is kind of out of your control, but be aware that when there's winemaker requests that come in and then cost, and sometimes you can get contracts written up that have the actual clause winemaker requests, and the winery will pay for them. The winery is going to hate me telling you to do this, all right? But what you do, say they come in and they tell you they don't like machine leafing, but they like to do it by hand, and we don't want a machine leafer. That could cost you. It's a 16-time ratio for a machine leafer versus hand leafing. So it might take you an hour to leaf a row by hand, and you can do a whole acre in a machine in the same time. So just be careful when you get requests for jobs that you might have to be a burden to your costs on your vineyard. That's a big pitfall that happens to a lot of growers.
Yeah.
Okay. Everyone's trying to save a buck. The wineries are, okay, and they're going to ask you to do things like that could cost your business a lot of money. So that's just one of the things to look out for. But the trouble is, most of the industry here, until you're 200 or 300 years old, they don't usually have some kind of system where they're growing quantity, quality versus SKU. Okay, so that if you go to California, the guys will come in and they might have a grading system of A to F, and you might want to be growing C1. They'll have a parameter of the cost per ton of what they're going to pay you, and they're going to tell you to ton up and do all those things for the different value in bottles. So one day that will happen in Canada, hopefully. Okay, so then those kind of decisions, that comes into yield management, crop thinning, veraison interventions. I'm telling you now, if someone comes in at end veraison and tells you to drop fruit on the ground, don't do it. There's actually no benefit unless you've got disease issues or problems or pressures, things like that. There's no benefit in quality at all of dropping fruit after veraison.
Yeah, at that point, it's too late.
At that point, it's too late. But I know for yield control from a winery perspective, people will go in and tell growers to drop fruit. All right. So that work should have been done earlier in the season. Okay. So it's all about relationships with your winery. They should be in your vineyard early. They should be in there at pruning and seeing how you're pruning. They should be there at flowering. They should be there at pre-veraison. All right. A winery that comes in October and then tells you to do yield adjustment, I would change wineries if you've got that option. All right. So that's just a bit of advice about yield management, crop thinning, and things like that. Crop thinning and dropping fruit is a costly vineyard. They're kind of band-aid treatments. That's what we call them. If you set your pruning correct at the start of the season, I know there's variability. I know there's seasonal variability, and it could be 20, 30%. But if you're pretty close with your pruning bud numbers, that you're leaving X amount of crop in your vineyard trellis, your vine spacing versus row spacing is setting a yield for your vineyard, okay? So you don't have to count buds. If you fill spaces, that's exactly what you're going to get every year. So I'm just saying those kind of things are things that are set in the vineyard, and if you did them early, you will save costs down the track, okay? There's no use people lay kicker canes and things like that for frost. I'm telling you now, if it frosts, they're all dead. The buds are all dead. It's just not. I still don't understand some of the time. If you've got 1 acre, fair enough. If you want to go in and prune late because of frost control, because your block's in the wrong spot to start with, okay, people leave pruning till really late to offset bud burst. There's studies now it offsets bud burst by 3 or 4 days. So if you're anything over an acre, it doesn't work. I'm just saying those kind of decisions that you do in a vineyard, you have to then go through and cut off kicker canes and all those kind of things in your vineyard, and it actually costs you more than the fruit you might have lost. All right, so there's little decisions like that you might have a look at. What else we got? Harvest timing, labour allocations. Harvest, obviously, if you've got the right crop level and all those kind of things in your vineyard, your harvest should be on at the right time. What happens is if it isn't, is you will have no tank space at a winery. You'll be picking in snow or ice conditions. It'll all add on to labour costs. So for that little extra 1 tonne to the acre, it might have been better that you grew 1 tonne less and get off in time than cause all these extra costs. Especially if you have a high valued crop, as in cost price per tonne, you're probably better off picking it early than leaving it there and then not to ripen and then add all the extra costs on. So I think that's the harvest timing. That's a thing. We purchase a lot of fruit, and I'm quite silly if I go and purchase fruit from 400 kilometres north versus our winery. The timing is, say, a month. So if I go and buy white grapes up north, they're 4 weeks after we finish picking the whites where I am. That's a big winery concern because they might have to rejig and redo all their, so they're hard lined or something like that. We're now picking whites again on top of reds. There's all those kind of logistical issues. So timing and those kind of timing things, that's more if you're selling fruit to a winery in a different location or something like that. There might be a decision on what kind of varietal that you're planting and those kind of things. All right, and access to equipment, like I said, if you're big enough, you've got your own equipment. If you're small enough, plan. You need to plan. Everyone's going to want the equipment at the same time. Okay, one leafing machine in a region of 10 growers, it might get there on time. Okay, so that's the problem with sharing equipment, is everyone wants something at the same time. So if there was one harvester in a region for 15 farms, I wouldn't be reliant on being able to ring up the harvester contractor and say, can you come and pick tomorrow? You'd want a lot more information out of your winery and a lot longer scope of when you're going to pick your vineyard for that to work. Efficiencies. Like I said, plan. You need to plan. You need to know your costs, as in you need to record information. The more you know, the more efficient you're going to be. All right. This all sounds pretty simple, but if you don't keep that information, and every site's different. I might have 6 or 7 farms that I go to, and they're all a little different. And that's down to the even minute details of pruning time. Okay, and it might be because of the history of the vineyard. It might have double trunks. It might be a lower cordon, so your back gives way 2 hours earlier in the day when you're pruning it. Like, there's all these little things that happen in vineyards. So you, as an owner or a vineyard operator, you must know what's on each one of your individual blocks. So that's very important. All right. Vineyard budgets. I showed you a picture of a vineyard budget just before. So it's very important to collect your historical data. And that's even like have a folder and collect all your nutrition information, like where you purchased your fertilizers and your chemicals and all those kind of things. They might have gone up 10%, they might have gone down 10%, but when you do a budget in the middle of November, December, the following year, at least you'll be in the ballpark, right? And then you don't have to ring around and say how much is a bag of Cumulus, all those kind of things. You can just kind of do it, and then you're pretty close, right? So keep information. Electricity bills. I don't know if you've metered for water there. I know you don't need water there probably, but yeah. So we have to keep things like water meters and pay for water and things like that. So and we keep all those costs, and then they're very useful for when you're doing your budget in the off season. All this stuff is when you're in December and January, when you go to Mexico and you can do your budgets on the beach down there or something like that, right? All your overhead costs, that's what you keep information. And then it's up to you and your entity how you want to keep that information and how you do budgets. If you're working for corporate, you might stay within their financial framework, like as in whatever their share whole period is or financial year. You can keep them like that. You can keep them in 1 year, like as in January to. I usually like doing start. Doesn't really matter if I start. I usually do a vineyard one from say November. Okay, because we start the pruning cycle in November for the following year, and usually you finished harvest. Okay, so it's kind of that, and you can do that and in your head, and then you can convert it if you need to for a customer or anything like that. But that's how I do my vineyard budgets, are basically based on the growing season. And then, like I said, allocate it on however you like to your entity. You can do it down by block, but every time you do this is more administration. So I know I don't like sitting at a computer all day, especially today. Look how lovely it is outside.
Yeah, for us it's the opposite today. We have 0 degrees and it's windy, and it's supposed to rain at some point.
I've got another sheet here. I'll just show you, say, a simple form that you can keep. Here we go. I'm going to do that. All right, we got that?
Yes. Okay.
This is a simple Excel sheet. This is how you can see I've got tabs at the bottom down there, and it's for different equipment. It's a simple thing. The reason we do this, it saves you money. If you don't service your tractors on time or do any of those kind of things, you can have breakdowns. It can cause time delays in the vineyard, those kind of things. And it's expensive, okay? Simple piece of machinery, single tab per piece of machinery, and then you can just list when you actually want to service. The manuals, you can go online for a John Deere tractor or whatever, and they'll give you your service intervals. You can set service intervals on those. And then if you've got a local supplier or you're doing it yourself, it's a simple thing. And this is just one of the pieces of information that are going to help you control your costs in your vineyard. Okay, so that one's a really easy one. Okay. Very good.
Excellent.
All right. So that's just a simple. So you can. Excel's old school. I don't know. I use it a lot, but I used to, and then I'd work for someone corporate, and they'd try to destroy all your Excel sheets and put you onto some program, right? And then everyone's running 3 sets of information at once. It's great if you're working for a family company that does Excel. So that's awesome. I think, what else are we up to? Forecasting. No, what do we go back to? Where am I up to? All right. Yes. So we're going to do your budget to productivity. So like I said, cost per hectare versus your cost per tonne. Cost per tonne is another way of looking at your vineyard. That it's a bit variable due to we have price differences in our tonnes. So it's hard to do metrics backwards, if that makes sense. If your tonne price was $1,500 5 years ago, now it's 3,000, and now it's actually dropping again. To put the cost together or have a look at a historical, you have to start doing some changing to the information to try and get a standard or a how you're actually going. So cost per tonne's important in season. In that season, your costs don't want to be higher than the money you're getting for the fruit you're growing. It's a good tax thing, but that's about it. All right. And I don't know what the rules are here. I think we've got to turn a farm every 3 years here under tax laws to keep that going. But season variability and contingency planning. Season variability, that's all to do with historical data collection. Okay, I'll tell you now, a cold season here will increase yields by 30 to 40%, and a hot year will decrease yields by 30 to 40%. So
us, it's the other way around.
No, the hot year we get decreased because we have dehydration, etc., and the canopies aren't as big. You get a reduction in canopy by about 30%. Then yield goes down about 30%. We also have variability in vineyards. Overhead irrigation versus drip irrigation, there's about a 25% variability there, a decrease in drip irrigation to yield. So they're the kind of variabilities you're looking out for. They're the easy ones. Obviously you got diseases, you got storms, whatever happens in season. But you should have a plan for that. That budget I showed you before, we usually say we're doing contract farming, we'd set a budget for the grower, and we're quite open. We'd show them those kind of figures, and then we'd say, righto, now we're going to add $1,000 an acre as a contingency plan because your leaf hopper was absolutely terrible this year or whatever. Okay, so that's what you do in contingency planning. Is a bit like life. You have a little bit of a savings plan, or you have something on the back end that you can fall back onto. Well, it could be credit. Whatever, you need to think about the variability in vineyards. And because you're dealing with Mother Nature, you didn't know, like here, that the bear was going to come in and eat 400 lineal feet a night of your crop, and you couldn't get rid of the bear, those kind of things, right? So, and then we do forecasting for multi-year. I've got a sheet for that too. I'll just show you a forecasting sheet. Share screen. I'm getting better at this.
And the internet connection is now stable as well, so that helps too.
Oh, that's excellent. 5 year. You can see that one?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so this is roughly a 10-acre vineyard or a 9-acre vineyard. That's an example. Projecting through. These projections are very important. It's for your cash flow and savings and your life. B, it's very important. Say you get a partner as a winery, they would love to see these figures that you have projected through. And also it sets up your budgets for the next 5 years. And there's a lot of variability in some costs for, say, a yield increase. But a lot of them stay the same. So there might be a little bit of nutrition additive, extra watering, stuff like that, if you're in dry climate. A bit more, I'm telling you, from 4 tonne an acre to 6 tonne an acre or whatever, it doesn't really change too much. Okay, going from 2 to 8 will change.
Yeah.
Right, so we got 7 acres of gree here, 2 acres chard. You've always got assumptions when you're doing these things. Make sure you write those down, because I'll tell you in 2027 you'll go, what the hell was I thinking when I wrote this sheet? And then, you know, this kind of gives you a little bit. So, and it depends on these blocks. So some of these blocks were 100% viable, and then some were only 50% viable due to the freeze that happened here in 22. So we're trying to calculate through a new rebuilt block versus, say, a block that was kind of 70% viable. I think that's what these two figures are. But yeah, VSP, so you make sure that you name what you're going to do. You're doing cane and spur pruning. Average bunch weights, this is calculating out the tons. That's a bit of information that takes you a little while to get hold of. And it's telling you retaining 8 to 10 canes a plant. Bunch ratios like 1.6, first crop 3 leaf. And then I've moved on down the bottom and then actually turned it into figures. So this is all your dollars per tonne, and then what you're receiving as a tonnes per acre. And that gives you your cash or your gross revenue over the next 5 years. You know, this is very important. Obviously, this is the base of your business, and could very well mean what you're going to get it for. You know, you might want to go to the bank and need a loan in 2027, and you know they'd be very interested to see these kind of figures that you've got. Okay, assuming 5 times value of fruit purchase. That is from a winery perspective. I'll tell you now, the winery makes 5 times in revenue what they do on a fruit purchase. So it's a no-brainer to a winery to purchase fruit. From that kind of view. So this was actually done for a winery customer. So, okay. Like I said, another simple thing to do. There's a lot of information in the background of that, but this is a very useful tool for your entity, right? So, okay. Yeah. How am I going for time? Pretty good.
Yeah. No, we're doing great.
All right. Yeah, so that's forecast. So scenario planning. So like we're just talking about yield variability. That could be anything. The person who gets within 5% of their projecting yield for the rest of their life wins a prize and probably become a millionaire. Probably make more money doing that than growing actual grapes. So I think the average around the world is between 10 and 15%, somewhere around there. So if you're 10% out, you're doing pretty good in your yield estimates. Okay. Market-driven decisions, stay well away. When I say that, your winery or your partners are going to tell you that they're going to plant Sangiovese because they require that next year. But you'll go and plant Sangiovese. It's a 7-year turnaround. You decided that didn't grow very well in Nova Scotia just because of its degree a day requirements. So be very wary of market-driven decisions. That's a whole different thing. We, as wine growers or wine makers or whatever, we're deciding what the market wants in 7 or 8 years' time. Okay, that's basic for reds, definitely. For 4 or 5 years for whites. Market-driven decisions are usually reactive. So stick with, like here, we stick with noble varieties. You stick with varieties that are growing well. Don't get swayed by the next door neighbour putting in Taradago or something like that because it's cool or that's what you like to drink. Make sure that market decisions aren't changing the viticultural decisions in the vineyard. That's all I can say about that. I deal with this all the time. And, you know, you get winemaker walking through the field and say, oh, this should be Malbec. And you go, no, it shouldn't. All right. So the only reason that would change is if you're the only grower that's growing something, or there's one winery and they're requiring a certain thing. But it's still the same. If you can't grow the grape there, don't get swayed by market decisions. When you're looking at market decisions, there's a lot of information. I would go, California is in a terrible state at the moment, but they usually had the best information of market trends projected, like business monthly, wine business monthly, and things like that are great articles and things they have in their magazines to actually read about those kind of stuff. I know winery groups go here down to California to tasting rooms because they're 1 or 2 years ahead of everyone else, and the competition's so fierce that they're trying everything new. So people go down there to look at things like that. So, yeah, marketing is a bit out of our wheelhouse, but like I said, just be careful about planting things that marketing people want to plant. All right. Anyway, and it could cost you a lot of money if you make that wrong decision. All right, especially if it's a variety that just not even suited to. You know, you spend $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 an acre to plant, and then the variety just doesn't even match the environment that you're putting it into. And then if you change partner, and then none of the other wineries want that. All right, that's a very big thing. Okay, so understand your industry, understand what's around, understand what I'm guessing, you know, Chardonnay here, most wineries want it. All right. So you plant Chardonnay if it's needed. And look, I tell you, it'll go up and down in value, and it'll go up and down in demand. But since the 50s, the 40s, the 60s, Chardonnay around the world has gone up and down. All right. But it's always there. Whereas, you know, I got fooled by the Sauvignon Blanc thing out of New Zealand. I thought that was a trend, but apparently not. Anyway, investment decisions. Like I said, it's economies of scale is a big thing for investment decisions. It's like anything, don't overcapitalize. All right, it's like your house. Don't go and put in a $20,000 bedroom renovation if it's not going to get you that in retail value in the end. Okay, so it's the same in a vineyard. Don't go and overcapitalize. Try to do things smart. Try to make things symbiotic with mechanical infrastructure, things like that. But don't go. I'm going to say it. Don't go and buy Frolight at $20,000 an acre, right, to keep your buds warm. That's not going to have a very good ROI. Yeah. All right. I'm just saying there's a lot of snake charm stuff around in the industry at the moment. And if you have to put lights down your vineyard to keep your fruit viable, you shouldn't have planted grapes there in the first place. Okay, communication. So all this information is going to help you, and it's going to help you get contracts for your fruit. It's going to help you understand your business, and it's going to help anyone say. It's going to help. Say you want to sell your business. It's going to be amazing that you're going to have all this information there. Okay, so it's very important. It's advocating for yourself, like it says. Like, if the more information you've got about your business, the more confident you are when you're going to, say, negotiate contracts. If the guy tells you he only wants $500, he's going to pay you $500 a ton, and he wants you to yield at 4 tons an acre, you're probably going to, hopefully, you say no. Yeah. All right. So, but if you don't know your costs, you might say yes just out of being desperate to sell that fruit, right? So you just got to arm yourself with that information. That just helps you communicate. So, Yeah, I don't. There's so much you can. Like I said, spreadsheets. Just keep them tracking labour, yields, all those kind of things. Yeah. I've got one more sheet that I should show you.
Yes.
It's probably one of the most important ones. And this will set up. This will be like for your base. We got that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So this is, I actually set these up for any vineyard or any, and you can set them in, I usually set them in blocks or entities, say a farm. And then set it out by variety. Now, very important, you've got your acres. So if you get, some people get mapping done, you can get GPS done, you can do it on your phone. There's all ways of doing it. Then you've got theoretical vine value. You can see there I've got farmed and cropped acres. Now, that's very important, especially if you're doing share farming or cropping or something like that. You can see this Chardonnay's got 1.25 acres. It's there, but actual cropped acres is 0. So that's 0 revenue. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's very important. So that you make sure that you understand between farmed and cropped acres. And this cropped acres is usually because it's a new planting and you mightn't see fruit for say 3 years, or it might have got frost damaged or whatever. Okay, so you got to be real careful. So this farm's actually not too bad, quite efficient. 10 acres versus 8.5 cropping. So still 1.5 acres is down. So you got to think about that. Theoretical vine value, that's just your vine spacing by row width. That's that calculation. Estimated vine, so this is the vine count. This is actual. So you can see this vineyard has been affected by cold damage in the winter. So it's actually got only 2,000 soldiers versus 3,000, right? So it's a third down on its potential. So you got to be aware. This is how you understand your vineyard. These weights that's cluster weight. Okay, so they're cluster weights over, say, it could be a 5-year rolling average, it could be a 10-year rolling average. The more data you get for that. Now, we take cluster weights when we do harvest. Okay, so we actually when we pick a bin or whatever, we'll take 10, 20 bunches out of that and weigh them and then record it. It's as simple as that. And you can ask your winery to do that. They'd probably be jump hand over foot to do it for you, because then your yield estimate's going to be way more accurate for them. Okay. We'd say pro forma tons to the acre. So you can set this as a budget figure. You can set it as a viticultural figure. You can do whatever you like. You can set, I want to grow 4 tonnes to the acre of Cab Franc. That'll give you how many tons you're going to get, and even done the calculation, even for cases produced, that's 70 is good for red. Some people only make 50, depends on their efficiency in the winery. Some people got Lees filters and stuff and can get more. So I just do the 70. Okay, that's a variability that you could get there. But you can see it's calculating each block. Separate your blocks if you've got 2 blocks of Cab Franc and you think they're going to be different, or if they're exactly the same, you can put them in the same column. Okay, you can see there's a bit of variability between these 2 blocks. So one's running at 4.6 tonne to the acre and this one's running at 4. Okay, so you could average those out. Anyway, you can see, start to get the gist of this. You can see it's calculating your tonnes down the bottom, your average tonnes per acre, if you want to know that. That tells you how efficient your farm is. And then, this is good information for a customer that's going to buy your old farm. 2,200 cases of wine. Because I'll talk to you in cases, they won't talk to you in tons sometimes. So be aware, just be aware of that they might be talking how many cases instead of tons per acre, and they might be metric in tons and tons. So be careful of that too. It's a 10% variance, but yeah, that's another one that they do. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Okay, we have a question. It
Yep.
says, could you quote some growing cost dash vine and growing cost per kilogram of fruit to illustrate some potential spread of cost?
Per kilogram?
Or I would say.
Is this to do, it might be to do with vine density? Is that what? I don't know.
Yeah, it's just the question that came through the chat, basically. So could you?
So what was that question again?
Could you quote some growing cost over vine and growing cost per kilogram of fruit to illustrate some potential spread of cost?
Okay, so we just want it in kilos per vine instead of like tons per acre or something. Yeah. Okay, I can't do that conversion in my head at the moment, but all I can say is that the vine density does make a difference. When you grow smaller density vines, they're actually got less kilos per vine on them, but you're getting more tons per acre. Okay, so if you go now, there's a few things to add to that. Vines depends on the site vigor. Okay, it's going to cost you more per kilo if the vine's vigor is more than the available space for the vine. So what happens is if you retain too little or too less of buds in winter, okay, which is called non-severe pruning, okay, or severe pruning. If you severe prune and you now go underneath the vine's potential, what will happen is it will cost you multiple dollars in season to control that vine, and eventually you will have no yield. Okay, so you'll go into a vegetative structure. What will happen is you'll get excessive vine shading in the row. Your buds they'll become less and less viable, as in that 1.6 ratio I showed you before for bud viability, as in fruit potential, will now drop down to 0.5, 0.2, 0.1, and eventually you'll just be growing leaves. So be very careful of just calculating something on dollars per kilo or tons per acre. It doesn't matter which figure you use. That I know people use that metric. And like I said, if a winemaker hears that you're growing 12 tonnes an acre because you put in high density, they're going to tell you to drop the fruit.
Yeah.
Which makes it worse, by the way. The vine will compensate, as in grow more vegetation. As soon as you drop yield, it swings to vegetative growth. All right. So yield is sometimes used to control vigor. All right. So just be very careful. I don't know what the metric is. Yeah, dollars per kilo. Yeah, you just be. I don't go down to that micro level in the vines, just because my vineyard, like I'm dealing with 10-acre vineyards and things like that. But I'm very aware of what happens if I under prune or over prune due to vine spacing. Nothing's worse than having a vineyard that can't expand, as in, the vine potential's king. This is what I was talking about, vine spacing. This is under establishment. Be very careful. Make sure you get soil tests and work out, and root stock and whatever you're using. Make sure you understand the vine potential before you plant it. Just don't go on a dollars per kilo figure. You'll end up hurting in the end. Your costs will go through the roof. So I don't know if I answered the question.
Yep. Okay. Let's see. So many growers feel they must choose between yield and quality. What strategies allow vineyards to achieve both?
All right, so I'll tell you a little story. I had a grower this year, and we had a good season. And he had 8.5 ton to the acre of Sauvignon Blanc. All right, VSP, 7 by 3 foot spacing, no disease, no bunch rot, no nothing. It gets quite warm here in the Okanagan, so his actual yield or cropping slowed the sugar potential down on the vine. It developed fruit profiles, as in secondary, first fruit, like pH was fantastic. TA came down nicely. The sugar didn't go through the roof, and it's probably some of the best Sauvignon Blanc we ever took for the winery. All right, so we go down the road. There's a 4 ton to the acre vineyard of Sauvignon Blanc, which a normal winemaker might say, oh, that's fantastic. 4 ton to the acre versus 8, you can't have 8. The 4 ton to the acre crop got bunch rot. Because the sugar in the potential of the vine this season, it got up to 28 bricks. Okay, and the other crop was picked at 22.5. So the higher the sugar level, the more likelihood that you're going to get sour rot and bunch rots and things like that. So the actual higher yield in that Sauvignon Blanc, the fruit quality was probably a tenfold. So it's variety specific. You have to look at your degree days. It's like I said, it's not going to cost you much difference to grow 4 ton to 6 ton. It will cost you a lot of difference to grow 2 ton to 10 ton. Because you're going to have to do a lot of work to keep the vineyard at 2 ton, right? And at 10 ton, you probably require more inputs. Okay, so just depends on what you're growing. Cost. There's some varieties. Pinot Noir is very yield sensitive.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I see a 6 to 7 ton to the acre crop of Pinot Noir, I'm probably going to think it's got no mid palate. It's going to be a bit wish-washy, low colour, things like that. So some varieties are, for a fact, aren't going to grow high quality. It's very important you know those kind of things when you're planting or establishing a vineyard, that you know what your economic potential is for that vineyard, because, like I said, you go and plant Syrah in your climate, you'd be lucky to ripen at 0.5 ton to the acre, and you're never, ever going to get enough revenue to pay for the running of that vineyard, right? So there's no way you'd plant those varieties, but people do. Okay, so, but your choice might be, you might be planting a hybrid that's capable of 15 ton to the acre, but it's only $300 a ton. You're still going to make money. So it depends on what you're doing. So be very careful about the quality versus tonnage thing. It changes for every single variety, and site potential, all those kind of things, right? So just, be careful with that. I just suggest that you ask around, or you ring out someone and ask them what you think about growing, Pinot Gris at 7 ton to the acre. Is it possible, right? Yeah. Don't go and make those mistakes. And then the classic in this valley is people rifle through the industry information and pick the variety that's the highest price per ton. Okay, at the moment it's Malbec, and it's $7,500 a ton, and that's because there's like 1 acre left out of 10,000 acres because it got killed in the winter. And the one winery that wanted it paid astronomical money for it. So, and then Vineyard goes and plants 20 acres of it because they think they're going to grow, and then they calculate it at 8 ton to the acre. So, these are the things that happen, and just be very careful about yield versus quality aspects. Okay.
Ooh, okay. So what are some of the, yeah, we kind of touched a little bit on this, but what are some of the most common vineyard management decisions that unintentionally increase production costs?
Usually a lack of planning. Okay, so just going out and reactive farming, that costs you a lot of money. That's a big thing. When I say that, say you've got a spray program in place and you kept it tight and you're running, say, sulfur. Right? A lot of us guys run sulfur now because we got sucked into the marketing of all the, the high chemist attributes of all these sprays, and they cost $50 an acre to spray. It's costing us $8 an acre to spray sulfur. I know it washes off. Okay, so you got to be careful when you're spraying sulfur, because if it just washes off, you have storms, you have to go spray again. That means you've got more labour costs, you got more tractor time, diesel, etc., etc. But if you've got the weather that allows you to keep it simple, okay, keep it simple. What I say is, if you screw up the early season sprays and then you get into a situation where you have a powdery mildew outbreak, for example, now you're into high chemistry, high cost fungicides. If you're organic, heaven help you. Okay, so because there's nothing that's going to stop the powdery mildew once it's in your vineyard that they actually have on, so they're the kind of decisions. And make sure that your farming practices are spot on early in the season. That's the biggest pitfall I see. Like weeds, right? So if you hate weeds, be proactive at the start of the season. It gets a lot worse and costs a lot more money. Thinning. If you want to gamble, you can do shoot thinning before flowering. That's the cheapest way of crop reduction. It's also a risk. So that's just farming in general. But the longer you leave to, say, drop fruit in a vineyard, it's nearly the same cost as, say, harvesting. Okay, so if you have to go and drop fruit past berry size, like, pea-sized berries, or getting towards veraison, it's going to cost you nearly as much money to harvest it as in to drop fruit. So that's an early season decision that would save you a high cost. Last year we were pretty proactive in all the vineyards, and we didn't have to do any fruit dropping anywhere. So that, and the budgetary point of view, it probably saved us, $1,000 an acre or something like that, right? So just be careful. That's why those budgets and those planning helps reduce costs. Okay. Other biggest pitfall is not controlling crews, like supervision. You might have crews that don't know what they're doing. They could cost you a lot of money. And when I say that, they could be tying, right? You're probably coming up to that soon in the vineyard. But the tyers were cutting off 3 buds at the end of the canes and laying them down short. So they've just ripped you 5-6 bunches of plant. Now we're talking about cost per kilo, right? You might have lost 20% of your revenue just from a simple mistake by untrained people laying down canes in a vineyard. All right. So it's supervision, labour. Make sure you train staff, those kind of things. That labour is your biggest cost component. And if you have, this is the advantage of being small. You might have small crews. If you have a large vineyard and you get 30 people in at once to, say, prune or do something, it would, in an hour's time, they can do a lot of damage if they're untrained.
That is very true. Yeah.
All right. So you got to be on those kind of things. And then, I suppose, things that it's infrastructure. People costs per acre go way up if they've got no headland space. If you've got a vineyard that's got headland that's only 3 meters long that goes to your fence, and then you've planted a row of grapes along the fence as well to stop airflow. There's things like that cost you money in your vineyard. Okay, so it might be cheaper for you to pull panel out at the end of the row so you can turn your machinery around, right? You might have inherited the vineyard or all those kind of things, or the cost of land's too much, so you just planted every vacant piece of land or whatever. But yeah, I suppose they're the big things. It's labour. Make sure you understand labour costs because they can blow out. Like you know, and like I said, fertilizers. Yeah, you can over fertilize, I suppose. It's not going to cost you as much as missing a spray early in the season and then getting disease, and then you could be a revenue thing. You might be losing crop because you screwed up, and that'll be costing you more than the plant damage, really. But yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much for joining us today and sharing your wisdom and your knowledge. I'm going to ask...
Everyone's got a headache.
No, they're going to rewatch this webinar afterwards. So yes, the webinar will be posted online and it's recorded so everyone can see it again. We will have those spreadsheets for you if you would like. If anyone has any questions that they didn't ask and would like to, please email them to me and I will forward them to Andrew, not a problem. And again, thank you very, very much for being...
Absolutely. And we're here to help. Okay. So don't look at, we used to have vineyard areas where we'd have 6 or 7 growers and we'd actually call it shit on a vineyard day. And we get in a truck on a Friday afternoon and we'd actually take turns in going to each one's vineyard and we'd drive around and it'd be quite hilarious because everyone would be taking, what the hell's the weeds doing in this vineyard? And, you know, why haven't you lifted your wires, or why is the trellis hanging over? Or, you know, and everyone would just pick on everyone and you'd have a few beers and things. But in the end, everyone learnt from everyone, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and it creates a community as well, which is important.
So that community's there. We might be all sitting in a truck drinking beer, but the community's there. So reach out, guys, ask questions. Yeah, happy to help.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you very, very much. It's been a really good one. Thanks. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.